It's all right. You're building culture. So you're building the fabric of culture. And I guess perhaps it was Churchill who said that the way that we create our environments has a profound impact on our character and on our interaction. And it can either be positive or it can be, not beneficial at all. So I needed to step away and see, and ultimately what I really realized I was looking for as I was traveling and visiting different villages around the world was I wanted to see what place-based people were like. And I wanted to see what it was like when people were integral with their environment. And, I didn't really know what I was looking for at the beginning, but I came to be saying to myself verbally, I'm looking for what people are like. Something's wrong about our environment, and I don't understand it enough, to really be able to see what's happening. But I'm pretty sure in the city where I live, I can't see what people are like. Something's wrong. And I was sensing, I mean, it's so funny. You study the colonial grid in school. In fact, you're kind of told about it in things like high school or grade school. But in our case, we're told we live in the Jeffersonian grid. It's so wonderful because it's democratic. Yet it's utterly not democratic because it features the fewest community gathering places of all colonial grids in the world. So we actually have the most intense isolation, and that can't possibly facilitate democracy to have an absence of places for discourse. So I knew something was wrong, and I had to go ask people living in other countries what was wrong, and they were full of answers. I basically had colonialism broken down for me. And the best piece of advice to help me relate to it was, um, that I needed to understand when my own family history came into contact with with an invasive force that then would be established through a permanent infrastructure of, basically regimented systems, compartmentalized, stratified, specialized systems that are so unlike the integral systems of a village where people run their own lives.
Mm.
So once that was explained to me, and I was advised to go home and just kind of stand there and see all of the long, flat, straight lines, the lines drawn between people that separates their interests and also tells them, like, you have no power of place where you live. Bureaucrats run your life. Then I could finally see it. But I had to go away in order to learn and hear and listen and then come back and see the world that I had grown up in an entirely new way. So that took about 7 years of travel around the globe. And then when I came back, I was ready to start my design career over again. But at that point, I realized I could work with trash and do more significant work than I ever could have working in a corporate office, with no purpose
Mm.
and no vision, no point other than just accommodating the desires of a client who might not have any good ideas or outcomes planned for the world. So that's the track I've been on since that time. That was 1988 when I left, and I came back in 95 and just started right in with my first project immediately. Um, One of the things that had happened was I realized I could initiate things. I didn't
Right.
need to just wait for the phone to ring. I could just start modeling creative interventions in public space right away on the smallest conceivable scale, like hanging poems from trees, putting posts in the ground adjacent to a yard with little vases that I put flowers in so people could just come take flowers from the yard where I lived. Little gestures like that to then big sculptural installations and creation of a gathering place that was modeling this fusion of everything from a Mayan meeting house to a modernist kind of Wrightian design. So I was really playing. I had discovered the thing that when you're a kid, which is that you can create limitlessly adults tend to have, they lose it,
Yeah.
or it's sort of pounded out of them and commodified out of them. There's this thing that happens to us, where we're kind of taught that we have to be selfish, so we have to hold our capabilities in until we're paid to use them, and then we focus them on perfunctory tasks in exchange for money. But and then we lose this proclivity we have to just create directly. So I had
Mm.
rediscovered that and had become kind of a creative loose cannon. And that's when my career really started again.
Ah. What was your first project?
Well, it was the beginning of a phased approach. I had realized that the typical neighborhood is missing a full spectrum of cultural infrastructure. So the first project was a strategic intervention, perhaps to in the midst of a neighborhood with no infrastructure, and so therefore people aren't interacting and talking. The leverage point that I chose among all the different kinds of infrastructure I could create to start bringing people together in that structure was a community meeting house, non-dogmatic community meeting house. But it was very special. Like in the places where I had traveled, I saw all kinds of sacred space, community space, the repurposing of residual tertiary space for celebrations and creative, experiences. I had been in all kinds of different places, from like a pre-industrial group and the way that they created environments for community gathering. That was very participatory and egalitarian, to, kind of beach environments on the Mexican coast where young travelers from all over the world, just occupy the beach and dance and sing and tell stories all night. So I had all of that in me when I came back. And this tea house was then all of that fused together, but with my design acumen, so that when you approached it, it was really like nothing you'd ever seen before. But it was all like the entire perimeter was made of doors and windows, mostly glass, and they were all on posts with hinges. So as you approached it, it looks like a Mies van der Rohe sort of, modernist design. Actually, more like a distill combination of all these sort of parts, but really taut, really fitted together in a beautiful way. So it's really spectacular. But then all of the windows and doors open. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of a meant to be transformational. But its function appeared to be a tea house. You would approach it, and there was a Japanese torii that you would pass through into this kind of like basket-like tunnel, which what I was doing was actually I was modeling a gigantic womb space.
Mm.
Most wonderful indigenous meeting houses that I was able to visit were based on the idea of kind of returning to the womb, more of a circular, and, something like a teepee. In fact, one of my mentors in the process of this travel, his name was Elk River. He explained to me that, I would ask him questions and he'd just be like, gosh, I'm trying to figure out how to translate sacred poetry into English. This is really hard. But basically, you can understand that we never use the word architecture because we would never translate what we mean by what we create into just the mere words structure and technology, which is
Yeah.
architecture. You wouldn't call an indigenous thing, a designed thing, a place to live, architecture. It's the meaning is inappropriate. So he said, like for us in my tribe, a teepee is a circle that is cosmological and it refers to the inherent cycles, and spheres, and circles that permeate our reality. And they all refer back to a common source, which is a great mother. So if I were to tell you what that is, it would be referring to the origin of being a great mother and the circularity of all things. So it's a shelter, sure, but it's also integral with our cosmology and our mythology. Wow. Okay. So after hearing that kind of thing, I was like, Well, we must really be hurting to not have that kind of attitude toward our own environment.
Yeah.
If that's what we're capable of and our ancestors, I mean, I know enough. I mean, there are literally writers say it's so interesting how Celtic um, kind of worldview and indigenous native worldview of North America have so many parallels. I won't be appropriative about that. I just found that very interesting, and I thought, well, certainly we must therefore respond to circular spaces and also think of them as participatory and egalitarian. So the tea house wasn't exactly circular. It was really literally the shape of a womb that you would have been in your mother. And it was really like, I can't really tell you enough about this, but being the son of my father, he's always talking about how design can uplift the human spirit. And
Oh,
so I was raised from the youngest age to think that design really could be, you could cultivate a psychological state in people
yes. Yeah.
um, through the
Change
creation of
agents.
space. Yeah. So when you came into this tea house, I was fully intending to trick you into feeling like you used to feel inside your mom, where you were alive and conscious, but it was before you knew fear and prejudice or any kind of negative, unhelpful perception. So people would walk in, and I was looking for evidence, like, will they be more open to each other? Will they tell stories? Will they be more joyful? And it was set up as a potluck, and it just went through the roof. I mean, the first week I had invited some friends, and there were about 25 people. The next week there were 150. It was every moon day night, every Monday night. And then there was 150, then it was 250, then 350. And you just simply couldn't get everyone into the tea house. And it was only about 1,000 square feet anyway. So there's only so many people that could get in the evening. And at a certain point, then all the doors and windows just opened so that people could pass in and out. There was a kitchen in there that was facilitating dispersing the desserts that people brought and the tea. It was wonderful. Anyway, it was a strategic intervention, and it's almost mathematical, the fact that it would work. It would work in any community where human beings have an ancestry in villages and common spaces as a basic design pattern. If you put the non-dogmatic community meeting house back into the fabric where people are living in isolation, they will come out and they will talk and they will dance and they will thrive. And that was just the beginning. Um, then we shifted. Oh, the city government then came and said, you can't have that tea house. That's illegal. And I knew full well from the beginning. Well, I mean, I'd been coached by Elk River. You have to start off by not asking permission anymore. So it was built illegally, knowing full well that it would invite the city to come say that it wasn't legal. But the lovely thing then was the entire neighborhood was unified in its opposition to the city. So we had set up a really lovely creative tension that the city very regretfully was kind of forcing because they had to force compliance with codes. And then they were forced to back off and grant a special exemption. Architecture and engineering firms from around the city wrote letters of support because they'd been coming to the tea house. I was through my parents and through my own career, I was connected to quite a few people that stood up to endorse the tea house. So it created quite a stir. And then while that was all kind of cooking, the community had the audacity to move its gathering effect out into the street intersection and take over the street intersection as a piazza. And that
Oh,
was that's like the most notorious thing that we've done. But that was the second archetype of public space. And the two go together. The indoor and the outdoor meeting house go together. They are a complement that makes a whole. So we suddenly had both of them, and the neighborhood was just rocking, and people were coming from all over the country to see this thing. Maybe even before it was legalized, but it was swiftly legalized and it was made into through via ordinance into a project that any neighborhood could initiate. without any limit to the number and for free.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I think those kinds of wins, if you will, or changes are just as important as the other things you're doing because we're pushing back against some of that created infrastructure that was done without a lot of consciousness or compassion, and kind of reframing it. And I think that's part of the wondrous stuff that you do, frankly.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a whole the context of design to emission is itself quite quite an important conversation. I find myself wishing over and over again, even almost daily, that people understood the context that they're living in with more
Yes,
clarity.
yeah. We, um, I want to invite you actually to the April 2nd meeting where we are talking about governance. Um, because I think you
Okay.
bring that perspective, and this is something that I've sort of been discovering for myself. Um, a few weeks ago, we interviewed a lady named Judy Corbett, who is one of the co-designer and builders of village homes in Davis, California. And what I have come to discern, and I'm not sure they were conscious of it at all, and I may be wrong, and I'm going to have another talk with her about that, is that they were wise in understanding the power of structure to generate community. And in that process, governance arises instead of the other way
Yeah.
around, which we're used to thinking about it, creating the governance and stuffing everybody through that process or into that whatever form we choose, whether it's sociocracy or democracy. It has a structure that we put people in as opposed to having the people evoke the structure from their relationships, and have an external structure that supports that consciousness in a subtle way. I think that's one of the beauties of architecture, actually, is that it can do that. And certainly, Village Homes is an example of 50 years. It's been in existence, managed by itself, and by the people in it. And the structure itself has fostered the relationships by and large. There have been a few quirks, but by and large necessary to keep the thing intact and functioning. And it's just happened. It's not like anybody's in charge of making it happen. And
Yeah.
I think that that is one of the sort of hidden secrets of architecture that we don't really understand.
Yeah. The opposite is occurring to me right now, where I remember in architecture school, we're told, and we're all kind of breathless as we're listening about how obsessive Frank Lloyd Wright was about designing every last physical thing. And
Yes.
sometimes people were so obsessive that they would circle on their own table where Wright had left the salt and pepper shakers. And I think, you know, he was an amazing force of nature incarnate.
Yes.
And at the same time, I think there's he was missing the point. He was like so interested in like an American design, an American way of designing. And he was like, broad open space is equitable to democracy. I think because he was saying that was about possibility. But yeah, that I don't see it that way at all personally. I mean, I do see possibility, but I don't think he ever once discussed the like he didn't. I never, and I've read so much of his words and thoughts because I was fascinated by him. I share his middle name actually, which is part of why I used to be so into him. So he never talked about colonial structures. He never talked about that imposition, which has also been a bit of a curse, very much a curse on us as well. No, I find that the frontier is really about social architecture, And there isn't any architecture worth doing if it doesn't support communication and interaction. So much of design culture is focused on commodification and objects for consumption.
Yeah.
And it's been an awareness since the 60s on the part of some, and expanding and growing, that um, spaces that aren't for sale, that are timeless and that bring people together, the spaces in between our homes, are of vital importance and so
Yes.
desperately missing.
The white
Yeah,
space that we live in. Yeah. I mean, I love Frank Lloyd Wright too. He's been one of my heroes in architecture, but he was a man of his time. And he had a big ego, which you kind of had to have, actually. And always, and still, I think there's a huge part of that in architecture, that it's an expression of ego, both of the designer and of the patron, whoever supports the design.
yeah,
Instead of seeing it as a way of bringing people together and creating community. That's not where we are by and large in the architectural space. And we're not really understanding the role of architecture in facilitating the health of nature either, which it can do. So this is something else that we've been talking about here at Soil Smart, is how to um, help architects and landscape designers understand their role in facilitating the health of nature, and in our case specifically the biotic pump and the ability to manage rain where you are. And
yeah.
architecture can help that. It can actually do things for that if that's part of the consciousness, which it hasn't been. So it's a new thing.
It's a huge realm of ideas and subjects there. I mean, what is their role? So I'm sitting here in a professional office where we're doing all kinds of projects, with and for communities. And I feel like I'm in a transitional state in every single case, because for one thing, I feel that people are healthiest, strongest when they are as integral with their environment as they can be. And
Right.
that means it doesn't just mean that they have an idea and then they directly create it. It does mean that. But like, I'm really sure from my travels, from raising a daughter, from knowing lots of people, that we're actually wired to have an idea and directly create it, not need to actually draw it, and need an intermediary like somebody who can draw it, and somebody who will permit it and insure it and fund it. I think, yeah, and yet here we are. So I want to say I think things are really screwed up, and the best that we can be, where we're healthy and vibrant, and the surface area of all of our senses is most activated and most alive and most fulfilled, with an aesthetic experience.
Yeah.
That's where we are actually the social architecture of in our own environment, because this is how we grew for, you know, evolved through a million years to become our nature. Uh, we are the government, we are the fire department, we are the nurturers and the caregivers and all of those things. And when we play all of those roles with each other, we're generalists, and we have the deepest possible experience with each other, and our deepest possible sense of place. So, what is the role of a landscape architect and an architect in that case? My answer is definitely that I'm a facilitator. I'm not a form maker. I'm a facilitator of other people's voices, in which design starts to be used at the service of community instead of in the service of a development interest that is doing
Right.
projects for profit.
Yeah. Well, and
You
I
know,
think that's one of the things that has amazed me about you, is your ability to sort of turn the whole client relationship on its head, and to get people to step into um, oh, I'm not even sure of the name of the role, but to be more initiative, to come to you with ideas about what they want to do in their neighborhood, and to then you act as a facilitator for bringing those things to life. I mean, instead of having you go out to find somebody who's going to pay you to do your work, which is kind of to the traditional capitalist model of business in general, but architecture also. They're always looking for people to pay them to do whatever they want to do. And you've got sort of a different model. So I think that's kind of neat. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I'm working in this building. There are two organizations that I work with, and one is an extremely grassroots nonprofit organization that takes proposals from literally anywhere, including houseless people, for what they would like to do or what they think they would like to make the world a better place, which is always about their own environment, their own place. So I'm really excited about that approach because I think that, the world will be a better place, not because of what some president or some budget enables or just decrees, but what we do as a culture. As Obama said when he was first elected, I need you block by block to act and work together. And so that's our vision is that, planet repair. Let's see, that's the subtitle of permaculture. Planet repair is going to be affected by people working where they stand.
Hmm.
And then the more that they do that, the more that they care about each other, and then they become more creative and resilient and indomitable. So it's a strategy that also is based in trying to release the limitless capacity of human beings. I think that's really the basis of every practicable strategy for making the world a better place. Is it has to do with helping us realize that we have our own capabilities and to tap into our agency. And
Yes.
if we undertake a strategy that doesn't do that, then we're wasting our time. It won't work.
Yeah.
But being that we're in this really screwed up context, I mean, everything is on the table as far as I'm concerned. Every
Yeah.
transitional strategy is on the table at the same time. Like, hell yes. I'm working right now with I think he's the eighth richest man in the world, his family. I'm working on a project for them, a memorial garden where they're deeply interested um, in helping disadvantaged people in the community where they live, just north of Portland, actually, to learn how to grow and store and process and cook food to
Oh,
get kids outside and use their bodies. So yeah, they're really excited about urban agriculture, and it's because of this young woman that unfortunately passed away prematurely, and she was beloved in her family, and that has motivated this massive amount of resource to come toward to support her vision.
well, yes.
So super powerful, wealthy people can be really motivated by the people that they identify with and the values they have. So yeah, okay. So there's two projects: the nonprofit and then the collaborative, which is the architecture firm. And we work on kind of anything. Like if a houseless community says that we need advocacy, then they'll call us and we'll meet with them. We'll come to their site. We'll facilitate design charrettes and then compile it into visions and make proposals and stuff. And that approach has been an amazingly effective way to promote ideas and to change governance attitudes. Like it's a quick action, low cost strategy that we're actually advancing through projects like that have led to funded projects all over the country that architects are doing all over the country now. So sometimes we're involved in this kind of full spectrum advocacy in which we're drawing sometimes, but we're using our skills to present and articulate and relate to building codes and planning codes and stuff. but we're funded by all these conscious initiatives that people need help with, co-housing, urban eco-villages, uh, infill, small scale infill cottages, multifamily sort of Pueblo designs for urban environments. Lots of wonderful conscious institutions and local businesses that are doing intentional work, growing food, with ethics and principles for localization and organic agriculture. So yeah, a lot of things are sculptural, but almost everything, like, and what's interesting is we're never asked to do a lead project or even like we use all those principles and like passive house design strategies. We did the first passive house certified office building in the country, uh, and it just sort of ended up there. But ordinarily, we're not doing anything to meet that kind of standard because mostly we're doing things that are very small and we have very, very thick envelopes and the things are passive. So they're capturing sunlight and for heat and they're, designed to be cooled passively. So we don't really need those, we don't need the living building challenge, which ends
Mm,
up being so expensive after all. You
yeah,
work like 18 years just to pay for the extra costs of that. And so we're not, affordability is super important to us, simplicity, so that people can really afford, like, we are a working class firm, you know, basically only occasionally do we work with very wealthy people. It's mostly that we're working with people that are very community oriented and they have nothing or they just have a little bit of something. And so we're really interested in serving the people that we're part of, we're part of that culture.
right.
And I'm kind of yammering here, but I want to just say, like, I have a zillion. Uh, I'm not exaggerating. There are so many things I would like to talk with students about, and every now and then I'm in an architecture program at a university to talk about these things. Um, but just to ask students the question, they don't get asked, who do you want your design superpowers to serve? Like, do you want to help the community that you identify with? Because so often architects are like they're wanting to do these like dramatic and expensive things where they
Yeah,
never get to sleep or they never get a set of keys and they don't get invited to the parties and they're sort of knocking on the door of an elitist culture
yeah.
that they really never get to be a part of. And it's not, I'm not eschewing it for that. It's more like I want to help the people who um, really want the world to be a better place, who really care about that. So,
Let's see examples of some of your work. I know you have some slides prepared, so let's go through some of those.
okay, let's see. Here we go. Let's see. Is this the beginning slide? Okay. All right. So, in a conventional context, you have people living in the city without a kind of nexus that connects them right where they live. And so you'll find yourself going way over here for your job, and then way over here for your food, way over here to meet your friends, way over here to take your child to the doctor. And people are just kind of traversing the grid and having this massive impact that they actually have to work to pay for. They have to pay for the bus tickets or they have to pay for the fuel and the parking and the insurance just to
And
support
time.
their, yeah, absolutely. How stressful all of that is. So what we've been saying as a basic concept is, why can't we just be able to localize with the people right where we live? Because after all, every neighborhood is filled with thousands of people who have skills and talents and needs. And they probably need your skills just as you need theirs. So why not be able to localize? And you can continue to have that impact, and you can continue to go all over the city if you want to. but we want to be able to change zoning so that living and working becomes more possible, and also to change the physical infrastructure so that people will actually be able to know each other in their neighborhoods and not be so isolated. So this becomes the concept. And the goal, of course, isn't just the reduction of carbon emissions, which is massively dramatic, and you can see why.
Yeah.
Um, it's that, and that actually happens through all these other ways that you wouldn't even maybe think of in advance, but through simplicity and through deeper connection with other human beings, your consumption patterns just are changed. You probably stop compensating for the absence of relationships, just to name those things. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is that the streets always get safer and safer and safer every day. The more that people are connected to the people around them. Your children are more and more engaged every day, not disengaged, because you're present in your own lives, and so are they. And then the social architecture of you actually having power of place, averting catastrophes, solving problems, taking care of each other starts to gel again into a kind of a habitat restoration effect. That's measured, in reduced crime statistics. We've already got all this going. We already know this. These are facts. But I can say for me as a person kind of helping getting the last 30 years of this rolling in Portland, I had seen enough of this as fact in other contexts in the world to know that as human beings, this could also be true for us. To be so localized would have these benefits. But it's the playing out of the basic progressive faith in each other. That is a culture that is shared around the country. And this is sort of a funny way of looking at it, but it's to basically look at a metaphor like this and say, we don't really need to keep playing the same unsustainable game where there's losers and winners every time, and people are sitting there talking about needing to get out of the box and think outside of the box. So we see a couple of ponds here that are community organizer ponds, or maybe they're permaculture activists. And then they trade sides and they're agitating among the ponds and they're saying, hey, you guys, do you hear yourselves talking about getting out of the box? Don't you see that we're actually in boxes? And the ponds are like, but we have to do what we're told. We can't question the system that we're in. And fortunately, they managed to get into small groups with facilitators. And eventually, the idea is that people step outside of the box and they go into a configuration where they're not inherently set against each other by design, but they're actually able to see each other and talk and be in a geometry where they can actually identify with each other and see the space not in between, not as a battleground, but as a commons. And so this is what we've been seeing as we take this attitude in our design uh, process across not just Portland, but everywhere we're working. People start to discover, oh my God, I have all the help I need all around me. I used to think that all my neighbors were like it didn't matter, and now I like love them and I kiss some of them, or whatever. We go to each other's houses and we have a wonderful. Our children are playing together again. So we sort of roll back the disassociative effect of the last few decades, especially. And so here the ponds have got a couple of hot tubs in the lower part of the image. People have, built a little furniture, and it's just sort of silly. Um, but they're having a little harvest festival here, and they've decided to reinterpret the conditions where they live. And this is the repair of the city on their terms, and it's not just the stuff, it's that the life force of the people starts to rearrange the container that they're in so that it's sort of like the effect of a snail making its own shell that works perfectly for it. We've been doing this work very successfully for a while. In fact, we managed to go into a vein that was rather unique. And you were talking earlier about um, village homes. There's a lot of remarkable examples in the lore of, the 20th century, um, design experiments. So we're not the only one, but we may be the most dedicated to participation and especially to the retrofit of what already exists. Like as opposed to
Yes.
going and finding open land and doing a new utopian experiment, which I respect, stand your ground where you are. And
Mhm.
by standing your ground and changing the systems that you're in, you actually have an amazing horizontal and vertical effect at once that includes everybody involved in development processes, including political leadership. So here we are being funded, we just sort of plucked out of the internet by the Rockefeller Foundation and funded to design prototypes for the revillaging of the 95 cities around the Bay, San Francisco Bay Area. So this is just showing some really basic ideas, but infill housing, small scale affordable infill housing. We've got all these ordinances now in Portland, Oregon for enabling the most amazing spectrum of, well, really, we've rejected the single family house entirely across the state of Oregon now. No one in a town um, over 10,000 people is building single family houses anymore. Um, then that's a whole complex discussion. But single family lots can now have up to four living spaces on them, ADUs times three. So now we're looking at passive water, passive heated water, and electricity, composting, gray water, water catchment, annual and perennial garden systems, pathways that connect people through the block, gathering places. This is just a diagram. It's not terribly rich, but the idea was just to represent an idea for the retrofit that then would scale up really to whole neighborhoods, whole cities. And the idea of this is, someone who would look at this and say, "Oh no, socialism," because people are talking to each other. But really, the idea is to reinvent the social, economic, ecological context so that I mean, the point of this is resilience. It's resilience in the face of climate disruption so that whatever hits a city, the city's basis is in this dynamism, which is right outside everyone's door, and they're deeply participating in it. So obviously, you don't just do this kind of thing and then remain content to be, have your life run by bureaucrats that are downtown. You're going to be driving the dynamics of change within the block. So we're talking about tremendous cultural stability, happiness, you know, uh, a kind of quality of life set of indicators that you can measure block by block. Here's a more local in Portland version of that where we're actually applying this to a conventional apartment complex and a bit over 100 units here in these different buildings. Most of the surface area used to be parking, but what you're seeing here in this design is especially the perimeter, becomes a walking path through native plant guilds that not only are edible, well, actually not just natives, but really sort of favorite permaculture plants as well, integrated within an environment of sort of native food forests. But the idea there is to benefit other species that you're inviting back into where people live. We're closing down a lot of parking in this view to create community spaces, carving out a lot of workspace in former living spaces in the apartment complex so people have places to actually do co-working, to exercise, have childcare, um, and then lots of recreational space. Meanwhile, the environment is literally growing perennial food all around them. So
Does
this
that
is
bring back the insects and animals that used to live there? I mean, it's still a pretty urban environment.
it's astounding. We just put in a pond the very first day that the pond was installed, and it's just a small backyard pond. A dragonfly was there on the very
Yeah,
first day.
yeah,
I mean, how in the world would they even sense that?
yeah.
So, yeah, oh my gosh, so many wonderful stories like that. Um, we installed a native food forest in a kind of large triangular space along a train track where the train was curving through the neighborhood. And as soon as we put the oaks, because we're we're the sort of dominant native tree here was in the it's kind of mostly an oak savanna here, so it was white oak. As soon as we put these white oaks in the ground, birds were coming. Native birds were just coming and roosting immediately. Not roosting, but landing on the trees, and they just were so happy. And the metro counselors who were there to see us installing the landscape were just in tears, literally. I
Wow.
mean, the one who had a wildlife biologist background lived in our neighborhood, and he was just like, "Do you see this? Do you see this?" What's really unfortunate is that the design process took 5 years because of the opposition. There were people in
Mhm.
the neighborhood that were actually opposed. Like, oh no, if you do anything creative there, homeless people will come all the way from Idaho to invade. There was a person who really said that. And and it took us about 4 hours to put it in. So 5 years. I'll never do that again. 5 years. If something takes more than a year, I'm just going to go do it without permission. Here's the most wonderful retrofit project that we get involved with, and it's the transformation of existing street intersections into public squares. And this is called intersection repair. That's how it's known. So basically, the premise is if people do not have a field of creative participation where pathways come together, which is the most, profound village design principles, like it's it's at the crossroads that people's lives converge, and that's where the village is supposed to emerge and thrive.
Mhm.
And that pattern of behavior, that's the phenomenological pattern, is disallowed within colonialism, which tells you that you're in a patriarchy, an invasive patriarchy. So our new structures enable this to happen anywhere where people want to do it within a 2 week process for free. So this design was imagined by the people who are standing here. They funded it themselves, by contributing $5 to $20 each. And then they enjoy it. They celebrate on it, and it grows a different kind of kid when they're involved in this. You know, they actually are they're painting, but
Yeah.
it's affecting how they see themselves in relation to other people. And the little
And you're
projects on the corners. Go ahead, Catherine.
well, and it in fact impacts their own sense of agency.
Yeah. Yeah. Their feeling of access, that they're not powerless,
Yeah.
they feel connected to other people. Actually, there was a young girl when we first got this started, and the Transportation Bureau surveyed the neighborhood, and she said, "It makes me feel like the whole neighborhood is my home."
Uh,
That is exactly
yeah.
what we're aiming for, is to help Americans freaking feel like they are part of a greater whole. I think right there is a prescription for world peace, or at least changing the systems that we live in. If people can feel that they are part of a greater whole, that they then start to be dedicated to, that will be okay. So here's the first little free library officially, according to articles and credits by the Little Free Library folks. Why it's significant to talk about that a little bit is that when this was built, um, I remember thinking this is going to travel. People are going to want to have this all over the place. This will replicate. And it was just made out of some boards from a demolition site and an old window. But it was used as a means to teach these two kids how to use hammers and how to drive nails.
Yeah.
But the ecological lessons are manifold. You know, repurposing of materials for sure, making a statement in public space, claiming the right to participate and create in public space, and you know, get the books off the shelves to have new life and to cycle through the community. Saying that educational learning is a valuable priority, and also the economy of sharing, like it's non-monetary, so everyone can just kind of give and take books, and so on and on.
What's the kiosk?
Oh yeah, we call it the world's first 24-hour solar powered self-service tea station. So literally is solar powered. At least the lighting system is. And the hot water and the clean cups are maintained by, there's always four families on a rotation to take care of this. And yeah, every corner has two or three. installations. On the opposite corner, there's an information station and a little community marketplace. And there's a beehive-shaped newspaper dispenser for the local paper called The Bee, and that's made out of cob. So everything's made out of recycled and natural materials. And that's just a great way to use what we already have and not need money, for anything that we create. But it's really about practicing alchemy and seeing the inherent value of things.
I
That,
love it.
I love working with reclaimed things more than new things. So here's just a few other prototypes. Solar powered cob kiosk. You can build that anywhere in the city. It's pre-approved by the Department of Transformation. The Department of Transformation, I like to call them. Uh, Here's the first covered bike parking pavilion in the history of the city. And the moment that the mayor cut the ribbon for this to open, he said, he's like, believe it or not, I have the power to do this. As of today, every time you submit to a project that has, been prototyped and already exists, all the permits are free. And he said, we should have been doing this. He's like, this is so obviously a great idea to enable people to park out on the street and have a space for bikes. Like he's like, the city needs to get out of the way. That's done now. I think the holy grail of all of this is the fact that you can do community composting facilities like Nancy's down here on the lower right for free on your own authority. You just go out and create it and it's legal. Speaking of habitat restoration, once you do this and the kids are involved, it's like this awareness or this opportunity that kids have always perceived is restored. Like they want to have their birthday parties out there.
Mm.
You know, there's a lot that we don't know about our history because we're always writing about oligarchs. But the thing that used to kind of fill the streets more, well before cars even existed, were, local gatherings in communities where kids would have birthday parties out on the streets. And so to see kids wanting to do this again, arrow shooting, puppet shows, piñata parties. We've had huge balloon throwing, water balloon wars between the kids. This is, mark my words, this is what streets are for. They were never for cars. They were for wagons, but they were more than that. They were common spaces, and you just grow different kids. Um, Here's another issue. Working class people can scarcely afford design support. And so in our classes where we actually teach a kind of a combination of urban design and ecological architecture and permaculture, we go to neighborhoods around the city to offer our services, the services of our students. And then families, have the opportunity to sit with someone who will actually work with them to create a resilience master plan for their site that then fits together with the other people that they live among on their block. This can also be done in a suburban context as well. But you see people renegotiating the boundary and creating openings in fences or taking down fences or putting in, you know, fedges or rather food hedges where it establishes a boundary, but it creates shared abundance, and you maintain privacy, but now you have something more happening than just a barrier. So we've been doing that, and this happens to be a block. I mean, a model of the same block we were just looking at in drawings, where people are doing some of that work to take down fences and put in pathways. And this is just a diagram of gateways and pathways that have been designed by this block so that people don't just always travel straight lines and turn 90 degrees to go everywhere. But inside of the block, people have pathways that can find the common center. So they're revillaging the block in this case. So this is really a form of retrofit co-housing or eco-villaging, if you will.
Mhm.
And of course, if you sit down with people and ask them what kind of program of activities they'd like to have on the block, that would be fulfilling for them. They're all going to say things like tool libraries, and kids will say tree houses, kid cave. Um, zip line to downtown, like the most wonderful and silly ideas, some of which are actually quite doable. Community meeting house, library, hot tub, play space, sauna. Like, we all have to go elsewhere to get these kinds of things in a working class neighborhood. And yet we're the ones who are always doing the work to create these things for other people that we can never afford to go visit ourselves. Barely, scarcely. And so here's the idea that we actually do some of this together. And once we are joining our resources and the materials we already have in our garages and the tools that we already have, and the skills that we already have, just to take an afternoon and have the people on this block work together has this gigantic impact that can change their lives. Here's just some examples of things on this block that people have done to create common spaces or to embellish porches and make them, more amenable spaces that people really want to spend time in. This is a retrofit of a zero carbon nursery school into the basement of a house. Um, the idea being that if you can bring your child from within walking distance, then you can be part of this nursery school. And this is a doctor here in the lower left. She's actually a naturopath. And through this kind of process of people kind of knowing all the people around them, she's able to close her clinic in a commercial zone and bring it back to her house, um, which has made a couple of things happen. She uses her living room as a home office. Then she infills her front porch with straw, clay, and cob as a bathroom and a waiting room, but also a bathroom for the postal workers that never have a place to go during the day. And then she adds this wing at the end of the driveway there, which is the first legal straw bale structure in the history of the city that's attached to the historic house. So all this wonderful inventiveness coming out of these circumstances, these opportunities that are arising from connection. Here's a house that is converted into a permaculture school on the same block, walls opened up, big sort of internal teaching space created, but the entire landscape is really just it's like living in the Garden of Eden once again. There's like all these fruit and nut trees all around you, and just this amazing procession of flowers and fruit and perennial vegetables through this long span of the year, all around you, including peaches, in Portland, Oregon. I'm getting a call. I know that my daughter is going to jujitsu shortly, and I might be conscripted to drive her. Um,
Okay.
just repurposing garages into community spaces and more creative functions. Um, wonderful images of people doing things together in those spaces. This is this kind of very Hobbit gathering place. It's a sanctuary also on the same block, and that sauna is also on the same block. And these are kind of high performance passive solar cob buildings that people get to use for guests or for classes or for reading or for naps, for singing, what have you. This is a 56 square foot teeny house, also on the block for our friend Jane. There's a lot to say about Jane. She's a indomitable young woman, um, a boon to the block. Oh, and then we're seeing another layer here on the block of annual and perennial gardens. And you can see in this plan that there's a little bit of street being taken up, but people are looking at the whole block and they're doing some contextual analysis to understand where light is really landing and where shade gardens are more appropriate. So by doing this kind of exercise as a block, where you take a Sunday afternoon or something to do this, everyone starts to develop a literacy, a design literacy for actually
Mm.
seeing how their environment works. So what we're trying to do here is to cultivate the life force of the community to cohere and to start to become stronger and evolve. And then through the projects that are appropriate and doable, alone or together, um, then the block starts to become more and more village-like according to the energy and the resources they have. But every step forward is quite strong, and it leads to kind of a permanent stability. I can tell you, almost no one moves, not just on this block, but for blocks around the painted intersection. which is adjacent. Here's just some of those small steps forward, made using repurposed linseed oil barrels for water catchment and old windows for, a couple of greenhouses on the same block. And you don't even have to build stuff to start, building stuff. Like here we are just gathering the biomass that normally goes into green bins to use this in a community composting process that then we, turn into increased soil fertility on the block and water retention. Uh, Jude Hobbs there, she's one of the teachers of teachers in the Northwest region. We bring her every now and then to teach the neighbors or classes about these principles. Urban urban orchard there in the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street. Why not grow some fruit out there? Here's a lawn becoming a community supported agriculture initiative. In this case, we call them Zone 3 root crops. So the kinds of crops that require almost no attention. Once you put them in, you give them a few months to just do their thing. So you put them in together as families and then you harvest them together as families.
Mm.
Still just on the same block, we're moving around the block looking at the ways that we've repurposed some of the public space, transform yards into mostly perennial systems that require less maintenance than annuals. Being kind of hilarious here and making fun of our friend Christopher Alexander, and he was always talking about design patterns, pattern language. And we were like, well, what about chickens? Don't they have patterns? So we just thought a chicken would identify with a beak-shaped front porch roof made of recycled plexiglass. And then, of course, an egg would be sort of like a house for them. And so this is literally this earthen egg up on these spindly stilts, but it's very, 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 very strong. It's kind of engineered. So we're just having fun all the time. Here's joint water systems where the homes and garages are treated as hills and mountains. So they overflow into now what is now a combined river valley. This is in the face of finding out that across the continent, for some reason and without our consent, water is not allowed to flow over a property line. Now, obviously, it's
Right.
going to seep over a property line, but if there's any discharge at all, that's going to be illegal. And the presumption of that is actually beneath us. It's the presumption that we will not have something in common, that we won't have, that we don't want the creative opportunity to let water flow together on our block. I mean, it's so arrogant and yet and ignorant at the same time to say there are no creative possibilities that could be served by allowing water to flow as a commons here. So let's just defy nature and make it illegal. So here we are just planning on it. Because after all, who doesn't want to live in Venice, Who doesn't want to live in village homes where the water is flowing all around you? And the birds are, and the dragonflies are, and the butterflies are all swirling around you like you're in Avatar or something. So you have to defy the rules in this case. Your awareness has transcended the rules.
And it doesn't flood, which is the big
Well,
fear.
yeah, you would be installing overflow swales
Yeah.
for every one of those systems. And along the way, even before you get there, you're installing all these complement systems like living roosts and bees. And there's the complement swales. The orange circles are large cisterns. So you're capturing the water and you're using the water, and then you're overflowing into adjacent swales. And the bodies of water, the combined water flow, all end up soaking into the landscape. So you're building your water table
Right.
as you're actively participating in dynamic processes that make you feel in love with your life. All these other things like, hey, why not have a big bike corral inside and out? Why not have a solar powered 24-hour cat palace with a solar powered aquarium that the cats want to sit, just mesmerized by all day? More just being silly, but also, we were just sitting around joking, having dinner together, and we thought, well, how do we get all the people who love animals involved? Maybe doing environments and habitat for animals. What's interesting is the cats get along better. They all want to see the fish. And we kind of spice it up with a little catnip, which helps. So here's where we've really tricked out the entire block. So you see all these integrated systems. And I know it looks a little bit messy, but that's only because it's diagrammatic and we're using pieces of paper. But you can imagine that all of this would be seamlessly integrated and extremely interactive. So we're sitting there thriving as we're reducing our carbon impact and increasing the quality of our life, reducing our need actually for monetary, for federal currency, and just kind of swimming in the all the other forms of capital that are available to us as human beings. And this is an image of really just the utter transformation of the neighborhood around the intersection going from being a mural to a permanent, permeable, convex kind of traffic calming platform. But people, frankly, are just aren't driving that much around here anymore. And then a few other projects that are related. A lot of that seems aspirational, but it's all very practical and grounded and happening around the city. And so are these infill co-housing projects. This is called Cully Green. This is a project that we did several years ago, and I happen to think it's the most successful co-housing project that I know of because there are just children running everywhere, and it's done so many things right. All the best practices of design are integrated here at Cully Green, like diverse and numerous and differently scaled environments, both inside and outside, preserving it. It's a spectacular site plan that preserves a lot of mature trees, especially this grove of Douglas firs at the center. But of course, community gardens, of course, lots of perennial landscape, and of course, a lot of native landscape as well. As affordable as possible and high performance green design. And that's what it looks like in our sort of design process. It's a very asymmetrical design for the most part, so that it feels kind of like it's very relaxed, not formal, because then people will be more comfortable interacting with each other. And rather vernacular. If anyone's looking at this wishing that it was more modernist or sort of George Jetson looking, that's not the point. We're fitting seamlessly into of the vernacular of the neighborhood and allowing the radical aspect of basically community living to be more easily embraced. So here's sort of the main street, large generous porches, just really wonderful landscape filling in now. Um, Community workshop, tool library, some of the wonderful integration of art. Um, there's a great culture of community welders in the city that teach children how to weld as they're doing these kinds of projects. So we'll have them involved in projects that we do a lot of the time. And I've heard architects sometimes say like, "Oh my God, it's not abstract enough. It needs to be legitimately abstract." I think it's fairly surreal, actually, but it's joyous. And if there's one thing wrong about the culture of design, it is besides being elitist, is that it tends to just strum a few of the notes that are of possibility in terms of emotional expression. And I'm interested in a broader spectrum, a more musical sort of end of the spectrum of emotional resonance. Who would not want to live there? Big, generous spaces attract people to spend time with each other. This is the application of these same ideas working with houseless people, but on their terms. So we're literally deriving the program of what they want to create because they've got to be involved. They got to build it. We derive the program from them, and then we help. Like in this was the first sanctioned homeless village in the country. Dignity Village started in 1999. And I was out there almost every weekend and most weeknights just building and building for 5 years to help them. Because I knew at the beginning of this, the people would mostly take care of themselves, but not take care of each other just because of acculturation. So it took a while to build the common spaces and help them really get going as a prototype. So I actually was on site working a lot. But this was the idea to go from, it's amazing that like when they're camping, it's really like they are a nomadic village, a fully functioning nomadic village, and they do camp in configurations of circles, which is a settlement pattern. It's actually a settlement pattern that leads to the emergence of a more permanent village with that same form of pathways and places in between. So it started to become a more permanent physically permanent village, and eventually looking like this. This is another one. This is a shelter for people that are just kind of traveling through the area and they're needing, or not traveling through, but they're in transition, is what I'm saying. And so a core group of about 22 people that are permanent staff on site, and they're all unpaid homeless people, then take care of about 100 people a night to provide shelter for them. This is called R2D2, or it means the right to dream too.
Nice.
We have many houseless villages now, and we've been so successful in getting middle school and high school kids involved that businesses, contractors, companies have stepped forward to facilitate the learning process of the kids doing service learning through hands-on work to actually build an inventory um, that is not even entirely deployed to help. So we have a lot of projects ready to go. I think that's it.
Wonderful.
And that's just scratching the surface. There's just so much. Uh, my daughter's feeling sick, so she's not going to go to jujitsu. I'm just seeing the message here. Um, yeah, that's just scratching the surface. There's been so many successful projects, all on this vein, all in the same vein. Hi, Carl.
This, you're on mute, Carl. So we've just ended our session. But it was truly wonderful, and you will be able to view the video this time. And we have a transcript also. So I think, lost nothing except the first 2 seconds.
I This has been a crazy week. I apologize. I was so much wanted to to meet you, Mark, and I'm meeting you, but not nearly as much as I was hoping to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you now, Carl.
Um, thank you. Um, I will watch the video. Maybe we can have a one-on-one sometime. I will get your email.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that'd be
I'm
fine.
hoping we can do more work with Mark in a number of ways. So we're gonna talk and see what we can do. I want to bring some of his ideas to the Spokane City Planning Department because I think it would be useful. So we're working on creating those openings. So
Okay.
Sounds
Well, just
great.
let me know. Let me know when you want to talk again. I'd be happy to get together.
yeah, and
Uh,
I would invite you to the April 2nd at 5 o'clock meeting with Michelle Smith, who works with sociocracy and networking organizations around governance,
I've
because
got
I
it
think
written down here.
some of your
Go ahead.
ideas, and I'm hoping that maybe Judy would be willing to come with us too. We'll see. But to just have a discussion about the different ways in which um, we, all of you, have facilitated people owning their agency in groups and what that looks like and what the learnings are and what possible cross-pollination might happen in that space.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You said 5 o'clock, right?
Yep.
Okay, I had 5:30 for some.
Oh, maybe
I've
it is
got five.
5:30. It is 5:30.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay.
It is 5:30. And you need to register through the website. And if you don't do that, I'll try and send you a link. But
The only problem is I have a standing Wednesday meeting at 6. Oh,
oh,
that's the first. No, no. The first Wednesday is always a potluck, so I'll skip that. And I'll be there.
oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, please send me that link. That would be good.
Okay.
All right.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mark, for everything. Yeah, I'm such a fan of your work. You've done so much, and really integrated so much. And what I truly love about it is working with what we've got, because that's what we have, you know. It's wonderful to think about creating fresh and anew and to do that. And sometimes we can, but so many of us live where we are in cities. And I just love the thought that we can rethink what we have in a way that will really work for us. And you really showcase how to do that in wonderful ways.
Thank
Very
you.
appreciative. Very appreciative.
Well, likewise, I look forward to talking again. And if the recording didn't take, we'll just do it again.
Mark, I put my email address in the chat. Maybe we can.
Okay.
I actually my focus has been on sort of energy, passive, natural systems. But one thing I'd love to talk about is retrofitting buildings,
Uh-huh.
particularly old masonry buildings.
Okay.
Um, the I,
Is that
you know,
something that you've been involved with already?
yeah, it's an initiative I've been trying to get off the ground here and there. Um, the last few months I've been kind of focusing on the fires because in LA, but um, I think in Portland, it's an easy stretch to convert these old masonry buildings so they don't require air conditioning at all. But
Yeah.
I would think I'm kind of imagining in Portland, like in the coastal parts of California, because things are warming up, people want air conditioning. Um, and there's really some great alternatives that we can implement. Um,
Yeah. So, yeah, that's all like it's more difficult and it's less difficult legally to do that work depending on whether or not you're working with a historic use. But everybody wants their building to be safe and meet seismic code. So I'm interested in ways to achieve that effect with less cost, um, and complexity. But as far as the passive cooling thing, I'm all about it. I'm really excited to, do some ground source cooling as well as, passive strategies that are just available, like,
yeah.
lighter colors, deciduous vines and trees. You know, there's so many things that people can do that they're just not doing at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my focus, this beginning of this thinking is from, um, you know, there's a huge number of industrial buildings that may not be historical, like Portland, but really for the cost of installing a heat pump, you can insulate the outside of the building and cool them and use nighttime venting, um, for about the same cost as a heat pump, and then have no more heating and cooling costs.
Yeah. Well, I think that I find that, we practice passive cooling, nighttime cooling here at the office and also at my home, but it doesn't work for those temperature extremes, that we've been having. It's just that becomes overwhelming. But I'm planning on doing some ground source cooling systems, install them that have not yet been installed, that I think I'm really excited to see how that actually would match up against temperature, swings. We had 115 here a couple years ago. So
I
how would
think
that
this
hold
is
up?
another whole conversation that really isn't being had, is how to begin to adapt to what's coming, both in terms of plants and trees, because we still want to plant what used to be here, and I don't think that's necessarily going to work anymore.
Yeah.
And so how do we figure out what the next step is? And in terms of design and house building, how do we adapt to that in a way that's not going to take more from the planet, because we're really good at that. We can add air conditioning and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, but how do we do it without that so that we're not burdened in that way going forward? I think
We
that's
got
a
a,
whole conversation we should have. I think that would be a
Yeah,
really wonderful
I
dialogue.
think I like to think we should design for climate for in 50 years.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
well, we're looking at fires. We're
Yep.
looking at energy disruption or scarcity or none.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be a very rich conversation. So let's talk about that. So Mark, I'm
Okay.
going to let you go. Thank you so much for all your time and help, and we will definitely talk more.
Yeah, I look
Thanks,
forward, and
Catherine.
I look forward to listening to the video, and I so much wanted to, but I apologize.
No problem at all, Carl. See you again.
Okay.
Have a great
All
day,
Okay.
right.
everybody.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.